second session for today is Shaping the Future, the Challenges and Opportunities of Population Dynamics. And our speaker, Emeritus Professor Lakshman Dissanayake, former Senior Professor of Demography at the University of Colombo, will guide us through Sri Lanka's demographic shifts. He will delve into the challenges of an aging population and the potential of our youth demographic to drive economic growth in the future. It's my pleasure to invite Professor Lakshman Dissanayake to the stage.
I'm very much thankful to Mr. Jaffarji for inviting me to make this presentation today. In fact, what I'm going to talk about to you is mainly based on my own research and own work. The opportunities and challenges of population dynamics. What happens most of the time without knowing the fundamentals, how the population changes over time and its growth, the composition, and also the distribution. We make decisions, and those decisions may not be the correct decisions that we make. Now, what is population dynamics? I just want to begin with that. It refers to the change in size of the population, the composition, that's age and gender composition of the population, for example, because that is very important, because we need to know, the planners, the policymakers would like to know the needs and the requirements of the people. It all depends on the age and gender of the population and the distribution of population over time. And these factors are influenced mainly by fertility, births, mortality, deaths, and migration. So they are the key components of population change. So I'll be focusing on those and how it is relevant to development, drives economic growth and labor markets, shapes social structures and policy needs. Now, population growth and demographic changes influence size and composition of the labor force. I have done a couple of projections before the COVID-19 and economic crisis. I used 2012 census data. That was the recent census that we had. And then I did a medium-term projection. Then I revised the projection after incorporating the COVID-19 pandemic, the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, and also the economic crisis. And what I have found, actually, our labor force is getting reduced now, especially if you look at the size of the labor force. In 2022, it was 65.3, but according to the projections that I have made by incorporating fertility, mortality, and migration, it will come to about 62.8%. And especially when you look at the younger age groups, like 20 to 30 years, and the reduction is higher. That is not only because of emigration. This is mainly because of past fertility behavior of certain cohorts. So we need to incorporate those things. And also, when you talk about labor force participation, we also talk a lot about female labor force participation, a relatively low female labor force participation. How would you explain that? And if you read some of my work, which was published by the UNFPA, Sri Lanka, have done a work And the title of the project was Counting and Valuing Women's Work in Sri Lanka with the use of National Time Use Survey conducted by the Department of Census and Statistics. Because in order to capture the female labor force participation in the labor force approach that you use in the labor force surveys, you have the labor force approach, you use only the SNA related activities, system of national accounts. You don't actually look at the non-system of national accounts, like household production, engaged in household production and unpaid care work at family level. But if you incorporate those two and the contribution of women is very much higher to the GDP. You see, you can in fact read that. Then also a younger population. When you have a younger population, it provides a demographic dividend where a large working age population contributes to high economic productivity. Now we have lost that opportunity. That happened in 2016. We had a large working age population until 1981, and that was the peak that we had. But by 2016, we lost. Why? We were not interested in looking at the fundamentals of how the population changes, how your labor force actually changes over time, right? But we don't have to be pessimistic. I'm not a pessimistic guy. I always, even by looking at some of the things that is happening at the moment in relation to population, I'm still positive. So migration trends affects workforce distribution, creating opportunities for economic growth, especially when you talk about internal migration. Although the indicators that we use to measure urbanization in this country is not the one that we should be using, we know that urbanization takes place. Then the aging population may lead to labor shortages, requiring policy adjustments to sustain productivity through increased pensionable age, whether we like it or not. Because there are three options we have. One is to increase the pensionable age in order to accommodate the losses that we encounter in the labor force, especially at the younger ages, and also the automation, because the whole world is moving towards AI, deep learning, and data science. So why not actually integrate those into our work? Or immigration. That is something that we need to be very serious about it, because that can create a lot of issues. But that is another option that we have. Then relevance to development shapes social structures and policy needs. Changes in population size and age structure impact family dynamics. Caregiving roles. Now we know that we have smaller families than what we had some decades back. The fertility norm, the family norm is around 2 here in this country. And therefore, the caregiving role at family level has changed over time. And women are so much burdened because of this family caregiving roles, because of the patriarchal mental, so many other things. And also that is related to workforce environment, whether we provide any flexible work environment for women or men who really want to take care of their families, the children, the parents, and so on. Because you see, there is an increasing proportion of surviving parents that you can see today. So, and the urbanization, as I mentioned earlier, so it requires infrastructure development. Then increasing life expectancy necessitates enhanced healthcare system. You know that we have to actually move on to certain new areas like long-term care. When you see now what happens now, if you look at the proportion of elderly that is over 60 years of age, in 2012 it was 12.4%. Now, according to my projection, by 2037, that is 25 years after 2012, it goes to 22.1%. So from 2.5 million to 5.1 million, right? So that's a huge increase, about 103% increase during this period. So therefore, you need to look at how we can actually take care of our elderly. And that will provide some opportunities also for the business sector, institutional care, and also home-based care. Are we thinking of those now? This is the right time. We are late also, right? Institutional care and home-based care. And also we need to look at certain social protection for the elderly, as Dr. Chandranath rightly mentioned, that we need to actually go for reforms in pension schemes, like introducing contributory pension schemes, etc. Then the educational needs evolve with population growth and changes in the age composition. Now, what we see now, today, now education, even the higher education is limited to certain age groups, right? You think, okay, the university education, you need to have these young age cohorts. But when a country's population is aging, and you need to focus on more on lifelong learning. So you need to actually think about those aspects differently. And also, you need reforms to match skill demands in the labor market. So in one hand, you have a reducing or squeezing labor force, especially at the young ages. And on the other hand, you have increasing proportion of elderly. And also the younger cohort, those who are at school age, their numbers are also reducing. Their numbers are also, I don't know whether the policymakers and the planners are very much focused on those. Or you just think, okay, there is a very high number of young children who are at school age, and there is a huge proportion of young population who require employment, and there is an increasing proportion of elderly. So you need to actually concentrate on those factors, which I think we have neglected. We don't actually look at the population dynamics at the moment or integrate that into our planning process, right? So that is what I really wanted to tell you in those two slides. But when you look at, this is where we need to actually fully concentrate on. You look at the population size and growth rate, you see that there are two curves. One is total population. I have taken from 1871. That was the time that we had the first census in this country, scientific census. Then 2012, what we actually usually do when we even calculate population growth rate, we use the exponential. And we assume that the population grows in an exponential fashion. But what I found, look at 2001 and 12, there is a slowdown in the growth rate. So if you draw this exponential curve, and we are going in a different directions rather than fully capturing what is happening in that growth. So what I have done was, I fitted, because this is like, this grows in a logistic manner, like S-shaped curve, because we have already turned towards that in between 2001 and 2012. But by getting the 2024, we will be definitely see whether my predictions are going to be correct or not. I think this very soon the data will be available to us. So what I have done to fit that, and also I wanted to actually tell you what would be the carrying capacity of our population, right? Because that is very much needed. We are not growing forever, or we are not actually declining, right? So we have a carrying capacity, which I calculated to be around 25 million, maybe less than 26 million, but we will reach that mark by the middle of this century, not before that. I'm waiting for 2024 census figures. So that's very handy, you see. If you look at a country like ours, and we don't have to actually worry too much about our population. If you have 25 million people stabilizing for certain time, because there will be no decline, because I have seen a lot of people are talking about, I'm very panicked, talking about, number of births are going down, the deaths are increasing, and therefore the population is declining. I'm not worried. I know the subject properly, right? There is a decline of number of births. There was. That is because of the COVID-19 pandemic and also the economic crisis. We had the postponement of marriages and also the postponement of second or third birth during this particular period. So therefore, the people adjust themselves, because we have already started our fertility transition. That was done in the 1960s. So we were coming towards the replacement level of fertility, that is at the lowest level that you could expect if you look at the fertility transition, right? And it will stabilize around 2.1 total fertility rate, that the number of children a woman will have during her whole reproductive age span, say two children. That's the fertility norm that we have at the moment, right? So we experienced, not only us, even in the 1970s when we had the influenza epidemic, we had this reduction in number of births, but after a lag of time, then there was a little hump again, because you try to resume marriages and also the births. So my projections is after 2025, there will be another rise of number of births, and it will remain for few years, then it will come down to the pre-COVID-19 situation or a little below. So we don't have to worry about that. The number of deaths, the increase in the number of deaths, I have written a paper on that about 10 years ago. Transition to new demography of death. Because of the aging population, our survival chances are higher, and also men do not behave well in terms of, you see. So therefore, I have written another paper actually, men's avoidable mortality and men's health, because nobody is talking about our health. So I thought, why not actually? So I looked at some of the causes, non-communicable disease. I in fact isolated 6 causes that differentiate our mortality and women's mortality. You see, those are very important. And the health planners would need such information, the data and such analysis. Then I actually drew population size growth rate from 2020 to 47. This is the explanation. So expected increase of 3.5 million from 22 million to 22.2 million in 2022 to 25.6. I said that population would stabilize around 25. It will not actually exceed 26. So average annual adding 0.139 people every year. So that is healthy. Okay, we should be happy. And growth accelerates after 2025 due to post-COVID fertility increase. Although we see a little bit of decline in number of births, or the slowdown of growth rate, but that will actually go back to its previous position. So growth slows after the 2040s as temporary effects subside. You see now, this 25 billion or 26 million will not be there forever. It will be, there will be a stability. It will go around a straight line, and that it will come to a decline. Why? Because of the population momentum. Population momentum. What is population momentum? It refers to the tendency of population to continue growing even after fertility declines to replacement level, 2.1. Even if the fertility decline to a replacement level, that is 2.1 total fertility rate, or in simple terms, 2 children per woman during a whole reproductive lifespan, right, for example. But even it comes to that level, population will not decline. Although people are talking about population decline at the moment, I saw actually in the media, I don't know why. Because they don't know what is happening in the age-sex structure of the population, the changes taking place. Because we have a large number of couples in the reproductive age span, 15 to 49 years, until they move out with the reduction of fertility, recent fertility changes. So until they move out, we will still have a population growth, positive population growth, right? So that is called population momentum. So I have calculated, you see, I'm not just talking about those things. I have calculated These are the key factors sustaining Sri Lanka's population momentum. Women, high concentration of women in reproductive years, as I mentioned earlier. Women born during earlier high fertility periods, such as post-war. This is after, because I have looked at, because you see now what happened, if you look at the fertility curve, we were almost reaching replacement level fertility in the late 1990s. But then went up again after 2000, mid-2000, because I looked at data and also I conducted certain studies at field level and found this post-war, 2009, the conclusion of the war, the resumption of procreation and also the marriage taking place, and also the post-tsunami years, because there was a high desire to have an extra child during that particular period. So they are now entering OI, their peak reproductive years at the moment. Because you see, these timing of the events are very important. You cannot actually look at population in a particular period. They are connected to earlier time periods, you see. So you need to relate. So you need to walk through X-axis, the time axis, and see how you can actually relate the present structure with previous events. So this creates a lag effect where population growth continues even as overall fertility rates drop, right? Then the impact of past large birth cohorts, that is also there. Steady number of births regardless of decline in fertility rate. So what I found, momentum factor, which I calculated, 1.17, so that is good, healthy. So if we can actually sustain that at above one level, or one above one, so we will experience population growth, delaying the onset of population decline. That helps us. Implication, population momentum ensures steady growth, providing time for policymakers to prepare for challenges like aging and resource allocation. Otherwise, there will be more and more people entering into high ages. However, declining fertility rates and aging population mean that growth will eventually slow, requiring long-term strategies for sustainable development. You need long-term strategies for sustainable development, right? Then, what are the business opportunities in addressing workforce and aging challenges? It enhances workforce productivity, upskilling, and training services for mid-career and older workers. If you really want to accommodate older workers, how do you define your age? When somebody asks you, you actually relate your current age to your date of birth. That's chronological age, right? But what I have done, I've tried to, because of this aging phenomena, I tried to redefine age and aging. So when I presented this at the university, there were a lot of people, especially women, wanted to actually come and see what their age is now, right? You see what happened? I looked at the life tables in the 1940s, 47, and also the life table in 2012, and looked at the remaining life years at each age. Then I started actually, I'll give you the numbers, I have written down them, right? So 1946 and 2012, female who is now 45 years, in fact, was at 25 years of age, right? The other way around. Now, remaining life, if you look at the remaining life years, that has increased over the years because of the higher survival chances. So if you compare the remaining life years, the same life years, with 46 life table and the current life table, 2012, for example, then you find somebody who is 44 years, in fact, the age, according to my recalculation, 25 years, right? Similarly, 70.1 year female who is aged at in 2012, the real age should be 60 years. So that's not only me, because I mean there are a lot of demographers who try to calculate this, because that has an advantage. Because the physically and mentally, if you look at the two groups, they are at different levels, right? So the point here is you can actually still, the key takeaway is that you can actually still accommodate them. Because rather than thinking, okay, 60 plus years, oh, no, they are no longer needed, they can't actually work, and they are them, something like that. You need to actually bring them into the current labor force and improve their productivity. That is why you need mid-career and that upskilling and training services for mid-career and older workers. That opens up business opportunity and development of digital tools and automation technologies. You see how much you can actually do in the business sector. And also promote active aging, develop the care industry. That is another important aspect that I want to actually tell you, because we have not focused on care economy or the silver economy. You see, look at my hair. That's not gray, that's silver, right? So you see now, it opens up opportunity. Have you actually thought about it? I've been talking about this in various forums. But the planners, rather than thinking, okay, we should be actually moving towards findings, protection, social, because I want to actually show you some of the things, but it's quite interesting. Sometimes I carry it also. Right, okay.
Take a seat. Thank you, Professor. And now I would like to invite Yasmin onto the stage for the Q&A session. So please raise your hands, ask your questions, but always keep the questions very relevant to the session that has been presented, and keep it short and crisp because we are short on time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Dissanayake. That was a very insightful presentation. I think we all had questions about what do we really do. We're hearing so much of news about falling birth rates, aging population, and we're like, okay, like, does that mean doomsday? But then I think Professor Disanayake's presentation did show us that we do have ways that we can manage the situation, which is a really good thing to know, obviously. So we have a very short time slot today for the Q&A. So I would actually like to open the floor now for some questions. Can we have some questions that are relevant to the discussion and very concise and very short, please? We have a gentleman on the right, to my right.
Good morning, Professor. I just want to ask you, there is a diaspora of about 2 million outside Sri Lanka. Have you taken into account the annual rate of their growth and other things when you are doing your population study?
Yes, when I actually was making the population projection, you need to concentrate on all three components. I have taken the migration also, yes.
I meant the people, when there's a growth rate for the people living overseas, do you know their growth rate can be higher than here?
No, but because we use the census definition, who actually resides and providing their information at the time of the census, right? But in between, in order to actually accommodate who are there, or the trend in the emigration and immigration pattern, we make certain assumptions, right? So that I have done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
By looking at the Sri Lankan data and also global data, right?
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Hi, good afternoon. Professor, could you talk a little bit more about the data behind, there's been a lot of talk in the press about migration out of the country during the crisis. So could you talk a little bit more about actually what sort of data you're seeing, what percentages have gone, and what you think that impact will be?
No, we actually look at, we not only look at the data that is coming from the censuses or other immigration department sources, Foreign Employment Bureau and so on, but also we look at certain information from other sources, even media. And because then we have to come to a compromise. And you see, the projection is based on assumptions. And those assumptions have to be reasonable. So therefore, we make certain assumptions on the basis of the available data to us, right? So after incorporating certain, because you see during the COVID-19 pandemic time, we didn't have actually, because a lot of people came back, and also we didn't have any provision to move, right? Even within the country. So therefore we had to take care of that. But then when it come to normalcy, then again people started actually moving. And that has been aggravated by the economic crisis during the post-pandemic time period. That information has been taken into account. I can't give you actually the proportions, right? Yes.
Do we have any other questions? I think we have one gentleman. Can we take some from the front? Yeah, thanks.
In social planning, is it necessary to ask for race? Because in Sri Lanka, often this question comes on race. Why can't we just ask only for preferred language?
Yes, we can. Because now we use the term, although we used the race in 1960s and 50s, but now in census department, censuses and surveys, they ask ethnicity. What is your ethnic group? So language, of course, yes. It all depends, because you need to make a policy decision on that. So if that is done, that can be incorporated into it. But at the same time, if you're talking about multi-ethnic country, and also the benefits to, or the equality measures, then it is also better that you maintain that ethnic group classification, because we should be knowing how many people are in each category. And I have a different perception. All the people think, okay, this race is, this ethnic group is growing, higher and so on. But what happens not only in this country but also elsewhere, not only just ethnic-wise, but also in other socio-economic groupings, what we have seen over the years is the fertility will be converging to the same level. So if it is 2.1, but the other ethnic, if it is the 2.1 for major ethnic group, other ethnic groups will also eventually come to that level, you see. That is what I have been always telling. That is what we have seen everywhere. It's a process. It has a scientific base. Because they follow the majority with a little bit of lag effect, you see. Time lag.
We have room for just one more question. Yes, we can take one from the front.
I was wondering what the importance of demographic dividend is going forward, because we talked about demographic dividend in the older age, new age of automation. So actually, you said we will converge around 25 million, and might be a good thing as opposed to a bad thing, given the new context. Your views on that, please.
Now, demographic dividend, although I said that that was closed in 2016, and we had the peak in 1981, the first demographic dividend. We have two demographic dividends, first and the second. First demographic dividend, fortunately, although we in fact suffered a lot during the COVID-19 and the economic crisis, and what we now observe after 2025, there will be a higher number of births, right? And they will be entering into reproductive age span in few years' time, and also to the labor force, 15 plus, after 15 years of time. So that happened even after 2000 during post-war period, and also the post-tsunami period. So they have already entered. Because of that, although we have closed our first demographic dividend, these people are entering, maybe not in large numbers, but a considerable proportion is entering into the labor force. So that will delay. That is what I actually couldn't show you the graphs. I have calculated the demographic dividend and support ratio and etc. And up to mid-2030s, there will be two rebounds, right? Two rebounds. So we need to capture. The planners have to actually look at those. They have to read what we actually do. And they have to capture those and plan accordingly. Then after 2040, there will be a second demographic dividend with the population aging. Now, what I really want to stress the fact is that if you really want to accommodate the interest of the population, older people, and also how you can actually contribute to the economy, making them less burden to the family and the country, you need to concentrate or focus thoroughly on the current labor force. Now itself, because if you make them productive, healthy, and improve their savings, by the time they reach at the age of 60, they will have money in their pocket to invest in other sectors like health, education, and so on. But we are not thinking, because you need to have that life cycle approach.
If anybody has any extra questions, please feel free to talk to Professor Dissanayake. We have the Orchid Room for that, and you can always talk to him during the lunch session. Thank you very much for your time. All right.
Thank you, Professor and Yasmin, for a very thought-provoking discussion.